know the appraisal process, I believe. But it's always good to hear it from the person who gets to do it. So, I'm really excited. In all my years here, I don't think I've ever seen a program like this before. So I'm excited to hear, all of your experience, Corey. He shared with me at his most busiest 500 appraisals in a year.
Yeah, it was between the two of us, but yeah, when things were hot, when interest rates were low, because not only, it wasn't just resales, all the refi market was really hot. So I mean, yeah, we were up to like 400 to 500 a year, at peak times.
Yeah.
And you could have had more. I heard stories of appraiser offices doing 80 to 100 a month.
A month?
When we were paid out. So when
3 a day.
we were doing
Or whatever, or 2
yeah,
every day.
we were trying to average at least 4, but I was trying to get like 8. But that's when turn times were like 2 to 3 weeks. That's when everybody was having difficulty getting appraisals done. It would take a month to a month and a half. Turn times have, I don't know if you've noticed, but they've come down significantly. Things are getting closed in a much more expeditious fashion. But that's because we were so busy and there were so little of us. That's just what happens when things get crowded. There's not enough of us out there to
On a property, I was just told 6 days and I was like, okay.
sold.
Yeah, no, it was like the next morning I had the report and I was, oh, what in the world? That was super fast. I was very happy.
Yeah, agents are surprised that we're
Yeah.
calling so quickly. Usually we wouldn't call for a week or two because we just wouldn't get to you. Now we call you the next day and you aren't expecting it, so.
And my addendum wasn't ready, so they were all calling, where's the addendum? We want to set up the appointment. They finally kind of gave up on me because I had a little bit of a difficulty with my client, but yeah. So you guys were waiting on me. I wasn't the other way around. Okay, we'll just wait a couple of more minutes to see if anyone else joins us and or on Zoom.
You want me to try to log on?
Yeah. we're trying. So, there you are. Let me join us. So.
Change my mind. My wife's a Mac. Yeah, that'll work. That's what I need.
Today's program is sponsored by Motif Mortgage and Cindy, so when you see her, please tell her thank you, I appreciate it. And my still we need to set some time together so we can work on Thursday outline, so don't forget on Thursday, Marisol is gonna be facilitating conversations around leveraging and when it's time to scale up your business. I know right now, business is down for many of us. But that doesn't mean we don't think to the future and what the next steps are. I think many of us use that as motivators to get from where we're at to where we want to be. So I think it is perfect timing to have these conversations on when to leverage and when to think about growing your business. So that will be on Thursday. We'll have lunch. So please come back. A lot of our feedback from the Spring Explosion was commitment to in-house programming again, agent-led programming. That is something that Apple brought up also on Wednesday's sales meeting. So we are really excited to encourage that and foster that. We got some OGs in the house, so we remember what that was like when there was a lot of in-house agent-led programming. I joined the brokerage during that time, so it was super exciting because it helped me network, as that shy, new, awkward real estate agent. This was the only way I got to ask questions in a comfortable setting was of other agents and the ones that would come up to you and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, you look new. And that was super helpful to me in my first year or two.
That's one of the reasons I came back. trainings.
I got it up. I don't know if I can.
Okay, I'll take it from there. So Corey, I'm gonna be your mailman of white. So
Okay.
anything you need, you just let me know. I'm gonna be here to help facilitate the program. And it looks like, wow, we're just about on time. So let me get this out for Corey.
Or am I-
Hey, everyone, if you could help welcome Corey Weaver. He is a certified residential appraiser. Taking time out of his schedule and business to share with us, what is the appraisal process? I was mentioning to some of the agents.
Okay.
My favorite song. He was sharing with us, I was sharing with, some agents who were here early. I always prefer to hear from the expert. I want a general idea of what our experts do in our world, but there's nothing more valuable than hearing it from the person who goes out into the wild, wild west and sees 500 homes in a year potentially. So, Corey, take it away.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, everybody. This is new for me as well. I think this is a new process for everybody, so I'm gonna do my best. I've prepared a short presentation here. Hopefully it'll provide some value to you and your business. So go ahead and skip through. Should just hit the space bar. Usually. There we go, perfect. So there it is. I am a certified residential appraiser. I'm also a licensed broker. I have my bachelor's of science in business administration with an emphasis on real estate from SDSU. I am now 38. I've been doing this. I've been professionally licensed since 2005. My father is a certified residential appraiser himself. That's how I came into the business. I started holding the dummy end of a tape measure when I was 16 and started taking comp pictures when I was 16. After college, I spent 6 years at the Tulare County Assessor's Office as a property tax appraiser. I think most of you would be familiar with Brett Taylor, who's the executive director of our MLS. He was a colleague of mine at the Tulare County Assessor's Office. We were both property tax appraisers there for 3 or 4 years before he went on to be the executive director of the local MLS. I've been an owner operator of my own appraisal business since 2017, where I continue. Just wait for Francisco to come back. We'll go on to the next one. Thank you. All righty. So what is an appraisal? An appraisal is a professional, objective opinion of a property's market value. It's not an estimate. It's not a fact. It's one person's opinion. Appraisals are used for purposes such as lending, estate settlement, legal proceedings, and tax reporting. So, there's many other uses outside of just lending. Valuation is developed using one or more of the 3 recognized approaches. The one that most of you are familiar with is the sales comparison approach. That's based on the most recent comparable sales that you're able to locate. The second approach is the cost approach, which is basically the land value with the replacement cost of the improvements. The third approach is the income approach, and these are typically used for commercial properties, 2 to 4 family residences, any property that produces an income, and those are valued based on that property's income potential. So my job as an appraiser is to function as an impartial third party, ensuring fairness for all stakeholders. So I'm not just there for the buyer, I'm not just there for the seller, I'm not just there for the bank. I'm there to ensure that everybody receives fair treatment. Big one for us, a use path definition. I just put this here again. It's the act or process of developing an opinion of value. An appraisal is not a statement of fact. It doesn't mean that that's what the property's worth. It is simply an opinion of value. And as appraisers, we are governed by USPAP, which is Uniform Standards of Appraisal Practice. And that established that basically, I'll move on to that in a little bit, but it kind of governs everything that we do as an appraiser. So we'll move on to the next one. So basically our appraisal process. So the first step is we receive an order from a lender or a borrower, or even from an agent if you guys are looking for a pre-listing evaluation. So the appraiser reviews the assignment type, identifies the client, intended users, and intended use. Basically, you kind of just identify the property. The second step in the process is the property inspection itself. That's pretty self-explanatory. I'm sure all of you have been on site when an appraiser has performed a property inspection. There's different levels of inspection. There's exterior only appraisals. There's interior and exterior inspection levels. For different types of financing, conventional loan inspections aren't as in-depth as an inspection for an FHA. Outside of that, we're just there basically to measure and get the square footage of the home and to walk through and inspect the interior, looking at updates and to get to the condition in the home and the amenities that the property offers. So then we move on to the market research and comparable selection. So after we've identified the problem, we've measured the property, we have what we're looking at, we start doing what we do. We look at closed sales, listings, pending transactions in the competitive market area. We choose them based on similarity in location, age, size, condition, and functional utility. And they are not cherry picked to hit a number. They must reflect the market behavior. And this is where appraisers make their money. This is what makes you a good or a bad appraiser is your comparable selection. That's basically what it all comes down to. And then what it goes back to, like I said before, appraisals are simply some person's opinion of value. So they don't make them a statement of fact, but with all of the education and experience that the appraisers have, that opinion should be well-founded. Finally, after you've selected the comparables, you analyze the difference between the subject and the comp, you make adjustments to the comparables. The goal there is to measure how much each difference, a potential client would be willing to pay. There's a lot of mathematical figures and equations that appraisers use to develop these. They are supposed to be market derived, market based. Comparable sales analysis is the best way to determine adjustments. It's also the most difficult to do because finding truly comparable sales is not an easy thing to do. So we can move on to the next one.
Corey, can I ask a
Yeah, go ahead.
quick question? I noticed.
And I'm gonna get some more fun stuff. I mean, I'm just going through, I'm gonna get to market trends and what we're doing, but I'm trying to provide a brief introduction of the process and what we do when we go out there. So we basically go out there, measure the house, we go back to our office, we analyze the data, we pick the comparables, and we perform our analysis.
I feel like in my business, a lot of times my clients, when there are the rural properties, those are the most sensitive because they do tend to be more unique. And they're like, why are they pulling, comps on the other side of the county and this and that? And, I just explained, we start with a small radius and then we just build out if we're not finding things that are comparable or most comparable.
For sure.
Anything you could give in regards to that sensitivity, or how should we frame
and that's
the answer?
That's the difficulty to help answer. One way that I can look at it, if you're pulling comparables in a neighborhood, you've got a lot of similar homes within that radius. When the nearest home is a half mile away, so I mean it's proximity to the data, it's the abundance of data. I have to go outside of those parameters to find a similar property. So basically, I can't find a similar property any closer than that one. Market conditions, aren't significantly different between Tulare or Visalia. A rural, there are some small differences between them, but typically a rural property in Tulare is going to be similar to a rural property in Visalia. So I don't know how you can explain it. I didn't help you there. But it's proximity to data. A home in a cookie cutter neighborhood, there's 3 of the same plan in the same block. Your rural property that it's one of a kind, I'm gonna have to go. I mean, when over $1 million valuations, sometimes I'll have to go to Fresno County. Like if I've got a house in a gated community in Northwest Visalia, it's on the upper end of the price range. There's nothing comparable in here. I'll have to go to Fresno County because it is what it is. I've got to bracket the data. So when I'm performing an appraisal, I have to find an inferior comparable, so a house that's inferior to yours, and then I have to find a superior comparable. So for ease of sake, if the house is selling for $1 million, I need to find a house at 950, and I need to find a house at $1.5 million. So if the house is the highest house in the neighborhood at $1 million, I'm gonna have to go somewhere else to find that $1.5 million to justify that value. So, and that's kind of what I'm talking about with USPAP, and there's additional. Appraising isn't just pulling the 3 best comparables. So you just don't go out and pull the 3 best comps that you can find. We have to follow guidelines and rules within USPAP. We have to bracket things. If a property has a solar system, I've got to find another sale with the solar system. If a property's got a pool, I've got to find another comp with the pool. So there's a lot of additional hoops and variables that we have to account for that you oftentimes that something like Zillow or Redfin just don't have to.
Thank you.
Really fast.
Go ahead.
Since you mentioned the solar. So if it has solar, but it's leased, it doesn't matter?
It's treated as personal property because a third party owns those panels.
Okay, so only if it would have solar in its own, then that's when it makes an impact.
Yeah, and then there's intricacies within that as well. If they've got it financed with a separate loan outside, but that's something that Cindy would be able to answer. That's kind of outside of my purview. For me, it's either owned or leased. If it's owned, I give it value. If it's leased, it's treated as something that's owned by a third party. And if you think about it, the leasing company owns the panels. So they're the ones, they can, if they wanted to, they could run in there and rip them off the roof. So that's why you don't give them any value. And then final step here is reconciliation and reporting, and that's pretty self-explanatory. You just reconcile your value indicators and come up with a value opinion, and then report that to your client. So we can move on. So what is USPAP and kind of what we got before, and this is the major sticking point that I think differentiates appraisers and valuations from something like a BPO or a Zillow estimate or a Redfin estimate. USPAP, which I stated is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, is the federally recognized ethical and performance standard for appraisers in the United States. Best way for me to describe it is like GAAP for accountants. I don't know if anybody's familiar with accounting, but all accountants have to follow GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles. It governs how we develop and report the opinions of value. So all state licensed and certified appraisers are legally required to comply with USPAP in every assignment. So anytime that I'm acting as an appraiser, I have to follow USPAP. So within USPAP, there's independence. We have to remain objective and free from pressure from lenders, agents, or borrowers. Confidentiality, we protect all client borrower information as required by federal state law. So one request I get oftentimes from agents is sharing reports. I'm not able to do that under USPAP. It's not that I care. Yeah, it's not that I don't want to share the report with you or that I'm worried about what I've got written. It's that I'm not legally able to. So the lenders are our clients when we work with banks. So you have to go to the lender to get a copy of the appraisal. So that's a USPAP thing that's annoying. But that falls under confidentiality. Competency, we must be qualified to accept the assignment and familiar with the local market. Every time I accept an appraisal assignment, I am stating that I am geographically competent in the market area of the assignment that I've accepted. Because oftentimes appraisals will go everywhere. I mean, we have appraisers that come from Orange County, from San Francisco when times get busy. So rest assured, if they're performing an appraisal, they have stated that they are geographically competent in the area. And transparency, obviously the work must be credible, reproducible, and supported by verifiable data. And then why USPAP matters. As I stated before, Zillow's estimates, Redfin valuations, automated valuation models, which is AVMs, and BPOs are not appraisals. They don't meet the same criteria. So they don't meet the USPAP criteria that we have to. So they don't have the same ethical and obligations that we do. big one for us. We can't just hit the number just to make a deal work. We're obligated to follow USPAP, follow the data, not the desired outcome. Even when pressured, we can't use comps from outside the neighborhood, ignore functional issues, or omit material facts that may affect value. Bottom line, as I've stated, a USPAP compliant appraisal is a legally binding, impartial opinion of value developed by a trained professional with no financial stake in the outcome. Then I'm not going to be able to move on. But that's what a lot of agents, they request copies of the reports and they don't understand that there's a lot of things that we can't share because we're not legally able to. I can't share a lot of things. So it's a legally it's more like, it's almost like a tax return. An appraisal is more of a legal document than I think a lot of people give it credit for. So can we? Because now I'm done. Now we're getting to the fun.
If I just hit something,
I think we just
Sorry.
move it.
did I?
There you go.
No, we're good. So common challenges that I run into with agents, unpermitted conversions or accessory dwelling units. So any addition or conversion that hasn't been permitted by the city or the county, oftentimes we can't include in the gross living area. So you need to check permit records whenever you're working on a property. I would highly advise measuring the property yourself as well to determine to see if the gross living area figure that you come up with is the same one that the county has. I worked at the county for 6 years. They're wrong more often than not. I don't know how far I want to go into whether or not the emperor wears no clothes, but a lot of the building plans are drawn off permits. A lot of times they haven't even stepped foot in the house. They just, and as agents, a lot of times there's plan changes. So you'll have 3 or 4 elevations for a subdivision, and they'll just throw whatever subdivision, they won't put any plan changes. So the county's just wrong a lot. So if I were an agent, I would measure every house that I have. And any space, and I talk to your sellers, any space, any conversions, any additions, you need to check the permit status. If they aren't permitted, you probably can't include it in your GLA figure, which is, the biggest, indicator of value, in real estate. Go ahead.
When you're doing the appraisal, are you checking those permits as well?
No. So usually what I'll do is I'll ask the agent or I'll ask the owner. The city of Visalia does have a good permit system, so I will check the city of Visalia. But outside of the city of Visalia, it depends on the municipality.
Understood.
So, it's just a game. You need to know which municipality you're in, and it's the same thing, different cities have different reputations for being good at keeping permit records, et cetera. So it just comes down to municipality you're in.
Got it.
I check it insofar as much as I can. I'm not gonna call a city or a county office. Some appraisers do.
Got it. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Now, for those that are like the new changes like ADUs that just go put into effect, for example, have an ADU. It went fine, thank goodness, as far as the appraisal, but when we pull up the information, the city said they had taken care of it, but it still wasn't reported or recorded yet. So when we have one and we're in escrow, what I did, I just told my appraiser, as far as the appraiser will call it, hey, look, we don't have the information yet, sent to us, we were told, but the city said if an appraiser wants to appraise it, that for them to call the city directly, then we'll provide them the necessary information. Is that pretty much the normal process? And we would just, it'd be beneficial for us to let the appraiser know, this is what's going on, can you please do this?
And I'm gonna get down to the bottom, but yeah, more information, the better. That's my last point, communication gaps between appraisers and agents. Share all the data that you have. If you have permit, like I take pictures of permits while on site. That's enough for my file. So the more information, the better for everybody. You're gonna get, just with anything else, the more information you provide, the better product you're gonna receive, because the appraiser has more information. The art of appraisal, it's all about how much information, how good the appraisal is all about how much information you have. So the more information, the better. The more information, the better the appraisal is gonna be. unless you're trying to hide something, you know, but
We
if
don't do
you're,
any of that.
no, but if you're trying to maximize value, yeah, I would share. I would share permits, I would share, as much information as possible. You know, and I probably would have done the same thing in that instance. And we understand that, you know, especially, you know, if it's if a property is going under construction, that it's moving, and you are going through permitting processes with cities and there is back and forth with all of that. So you may not have a final permit or something like that. So I think most underappraisers understand that it's kind of a fluid event and they'll accept, you know, what you said. I kind of rule of thumb, not a good thing, but if I trust you, you know, if you sound like you know what you're doing, I'm gonna go with that. But I'll do my homework as well. But yeah, more information the better. But and then third point, access issues and I mean, yeah. Get appraisers in as quick as possible. That's the inspections, if you can work with tenants, if there's a tenant involved, sellers. But if you need an appraisal quickly, that's the best way that you can facilitate it is working on getting the inspection scheduled. Delays often occur when tenants won't allow interior access, et cetera. So more often than not, if an appraisal is delayed, it's delayed because of the inspection and the appraiser was unable to gain access. And then unrealistic terms or short-term rentals. We're starting to run into this more with short-term rentals, with Airbnbs, et cetera. But you know, some contracts reflect inflated concessions or buyer credits, et cetera. But that kind of falls in line with that last point. Just communicate with the appraiser. I provide comps. You know, I don't know how other appraisers act. I've heard from agents that they don't like people out there on their inspections or whatever. I take anything from an agent. If you come with a package of sales, I appreciate that. It shows that you did work. It shows that you've got something invested in the property. I may or may not use the information that you provide, but I think it shows due diligence, and I would never turn down or decline information that an agent brought. So if I can offer any assistance, yeah, that would be my advice is just provide as much information you can to the appraiser. You're gonna get a better appraisal. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I should let you know if it's a short-term rental expectation or like if it's gonna be Airbnb or not?
Only if that depends, like most things, that depends. The short-term rentals apply to rental forms. So like if your borrower is getting if he's using it for rental income, then I'll need to know that. But
Oh, okay.
that's also kind of a lending thing. For me, it just depends on whether or not I need rental income or not. I would share that, overshare, yes.
Okay.
Like I said, I will take the more information, the better. If I can use the information, I will use it. If I can't, I won't. And it'll be in the file for later.
Good question.
Yeah.
Do you guys count any value to anybody adding like a back patio to their home? Whether it was permitted or not, like, is that?
Just a covered patio or enclosed patio or something? Not typically, because it depends, like most things. It depends on the size and the scope of the patio. Is it above average? I mean, you know, is it above average? Because typically most dwellings in the area have covered patio areas.
Yeah.
So if it's above and beyond what the typical market expects, then it might return. But typically not. I mean, typically as a rule of thumb, no. But the legal answer is what does the market expect? But around here, most dwellings have a covered patio area. Most dwellings include a covered entry and a covered patio area. So unless that patio area is far and above what a normal patio area would be, it's not going to bring value. But you honestly, you know, agents, you guys with boots on the ground, you guys should know, you guys have a better idea of that oftentimes than we do. I'm always coming in behind, you know, listings and active listings don't matter to me as much. I'm looking at closed comps. So I'm looking at sales that have already closed. So I'm behind you guys. You guys are probably 30 days ahead of me as far as value. And you guys know your market, you guys know your buyers and your sellers. So that's my answer. I would say no. But you know, you can do a little, you know, be aggressive, get as much as you can. And it's always a range of value. It's never an exact science. There's always a range of value from 325 to 375. So, you know, if you have a nice patio, I'm going to reconcile towards the upper end of the value. So I'm going to go closer to 375. If the property needs work, I'm going to go closer to 325. So there's always a range of value that appraisers are working within, and things like patios and amenities like that will drive an appraiser to reconcile towards the upper end of the value. So they provide contributory value in that manner. Go ahead.
Kind of the same question, but in regards to pools. Do pools, whether a home has or doesn't have one, have a base price or increase as far as value? Or does it again depend on the nature of the pool if it's?
Buy a house with a pool.
I did.
That's what my dad's always said. Yeah, no, you're not, yeah, you're not, the market's not gonna return.
Right.
The market's not gonna return what you put into a pool. Right now, just a pool without a spa is probably about 45,000. With the spa, pool with the spa is about 60. You're probably max 20 to 25. It depends on the price range that you're in as well. All of this depends on the price range you're in. So if you're talking about a 500, a 750 to $1 million house, it'll probably return 20 to 25. But if you're talking to a 250 to a $300,000 house, it's probably gonna be more like 10 to 15. So it's about the price range that you're in. That's typically what I use. 10 to 15 on kind of middle to lower range, and 20 to 25 on higher end properties. I think most appraisers are, I think that's a pretty typical number. But yeah, you definitely, same thing with patio. You're gonna spend more constructing a patio than the market's gonna return. Cost doesn't always equal market. And yeah, you're typically, you build stuff for love. If you're building a pool, you better like it.
You better use it.
Yeah.
Well, not anymore with gas and electricity. Go ahead.
When you have an appeal process for an value appraisal, what does that process look like when it hits your desk? And how flexible are you to be able to do that?
Yeah, those are difficult. Basically how it looks, we just receive a request from the lender, and they just, basically stating whatever your position is. I would say typically for us, I know what I'm there to do. I'm there to hit your price. So I understand if I'm not hitting your price, I understand that's not a good thing. So I do the best that I can with the information and data I have. But it's to change an appraiser's opinion, you have to come up with, for me, I would need a comp that I didn't consider. So you would need to provide a comparable sale that I was unaware of or that I didn't consider in the original appraisal. The one thing that I would stay away from is nitpicking particular adjustments or nitpicking comps because of it's an opinion. So it's a subject, it's an individual's opinion. You may have adjusted that comp a little differently than that of individual did, but honestly, that's neither here nor there. For me, I need data. So like, if you look at the valuation, if the comps that they're using are, if you believe that those are good comps, it'd be very hard, to come off. But as far as what we receive a message stating that, that the client is requesting what they call it a reconsideration of value. And they usually provide the description why. So they'll just say that comp 3 isn't comparable. I've got these comps. But for me, I really, nitpicking, my data, you can analyze the data a little bit differently, but as long as we're using the same comps, we should be in the same ballpark. So for me to really change evaluation, I would need a comp that I didn't consider.
Do you look at FSBOs and private sales other than whatever's on the MLS for comps as well?
You can,
or?
yeah, you can look. So what I'll do is you can search the public property records. So I do it through Fresno's MLS. But you can search the public property records, and any property that's ever transferred will reflect there. So like if it's sold for 40,000 or something, it'll be there. So non-market, off-market transactions are listed in the public property records, but it's not something that I typically do. So that would be a case that, yeah, if you've got a private party or an off-market transaction that I was unaware of, that would definitely be something that would make me reconsider my valuation. Does that help?
Absolutely, yes. And also.
Do you have a particular instance you're thinking about, or?
I do. There's a house, so it's 5472 square feet.
Yeah,
It
that's
is-
tough.
And it's in a community where, yes, there's a lot of older, but nothing like it. So it's a 4-bedroom, 5 bathrooms, and it has like a in-law quarters within the home, aside so comparables for that. How far can you go? And,
Like I was saying, I'll go to Fresno County if I have to.
okay,
Because they have property, they have 5,500 square foot houses with mother-in-law quarters. It has to do with demographics. Fresno has a higher income base, they have higher demographics, so there's more, there's more availability of those types of properties. So I will go to a different area if I have to. But I'm gonna use something in the area. I mean, even if it's like 4,000, so I gotta use something in the area. But to find a 5,500 or a 6,000 square foot something, I may have to go to Fresno, I may have to go somewhere else. Or you may have to.
You know what, just to piggyback off, just from experience and from going through all the over 20 years worth, isn't it just safe to say there's just so many variables for one thing, and appraisers are not gonna want to switch it because which appraiser wants to make that mistake? So that could, and then we've had a couple cases where we actually found a better comparable, literally like almost on ident, and we'll get the response, well, we need 2 comparables because one does not suffice.
Okay.
So my rule of thumb is I always say, if we don't have at least 2, then we're not gonna fight it, we're not gonna contest it. We can, but that's just all and I leave it to them because of all the stuff we have to provide, the reasoning. And then we always look at the actual appraisal, because a lot of times when usually it's on the other end, where we're gonna fight, we're gonna contest it. My first question, did you actually look at the appraisal to see what they used? Because your comps have to be better than those comps, or they're gonna get thrown out. Same thing, we had one where they had a nicer comp, but it was literally over twice the distance, where the appraiser said, I can make the adjustables necessary to make this stick, and that's what I'm doing. I'm not gonna go use that other one, even though it would, give you that pricing.
And that's the whole use. We have a lot of leeway as appraisers, and that's kind of what I was saying, that it's an opinion. The appraisal industry isn't standardized, which can be very frustrating. It's each individual appraiser. Yeah, it kind of does come to that. So like, you're asking me questions, and that's how I would handle the situation, and that's not necessarily how every appraiser would. So I can understand how frustrating that would be. The best thing that you can do is have data on your side, and just sales and sales. But yeah, they don't, even if you do provide a sale that is better than what they have, they don't have to change it. They aren't legally obligated to change anything. So, and the best way is, approach the situation with grace and humility, and you get a lot more bees with honey than vinegar. So, you use your powers as much as you can. But yeah, it's a very difficult situation. So appraisers don't have to do anything. You can just submit it, and I can just throw it away and said, I looked at it and I didn't do anything, So I mean, very well that can happen.
how
Go ahead.
far back can you go?
Far back as I need to, but typically 12 months. But for something like 5,500 square feet, I'll go back 18 to 24.
Would it be on would it be on the FHA and the conventional? There is.
FHA, I gotta have at least 2 within the last 6 months. So, FHA, like just with the inspection, there's higher inspection levels. It's with the data as well. I have to have more recent comps with FHA.
Imagine with the scarcity of the activity right now that you are going beyond 6 months for.
Yeah, it was, when things were hot, my job was easy. It is much more difficult to find comps and find data right now.
And then I would also think if you're referring to public record for properties that are transferring, I would just assume, and it's just my assumption, that those price points would be a lot less because they didn't hit the market. Is there any correlation
Sure.
there?
Yes.
I would think of a transfer like my Mexican family passed on properties to, brothers and sisters, and it didn't go to a real estate agent. They just sold it to their brother for $30,000. So I don't know how valuable a pool of data that could be, but I don't know.
You're absolutely correct, and we have to analyze that. So The sales that are off market, they can be market, they can be indicative of a market value. So as an appraiser, you're supposed to analyze that data and determine whether or not that comparable.
It's
is
not an
indicative of market.
overwhelming amount of data that is potentially useful.
No, and you typically only do that, like, I'm not gonna do that unless it's a house, like, if it's a cookie cutter in town, I'm not gonna go with an off-market transaction, I'm gonna use MLS data in that instance. So most things in appraisal just depends on the particular situation. But in a unique, complex situation, you're gonna do whatever you can to find it.
I have a question in
Mhm.
regards to the top. So is that something that they provide you when they ask you to do it, the RPA?
Oh, well, lenders give us that, and these are just, but it's same thing, full disclosure, as much data as possible is always gonna help the appraiser provide a better product at the end. And like I said, I can only speak for myself, but yeah, if I can't use it, I'm just not gonna use it, so.
I just didn't know, because it says include the full, I'm like, no one ever told me that, so that's why I just wanted
I
to
just ignore that,
verify.
ignore that one, but it kind of just, I used AI for this, so, but it's just
One
piggybacking.
of our next programs, by the way.
There you go. But yeah, so, kind of full disclosure, same thing, full disclosure, provide as much information to the appraiser, more, not less is better. Go ahead.
Oh, I was curious about what your experiences are like in Three Rivers area, the nearest Sequoia Mountains, because I have a lot of clients there it's been really challenging.
That's why you asked about the short-term rental.
Yeah.
Short-term rentals, Three Rivers, yeah.
Oh, shocking.
What's your experience on appraising these cabins and all that?
I mean, insofar as, I've done quite a few, what do you want to know about
Are they
that?
difficult? Because it's been very.
Yeah, no, they're not easy, no.
How far do you how far do you go to?
Typically, I'll stay within Three Rivers, Lemon Cove, the Merton Valley area. But you just stay in Three Rivers. I mean, but it's gonna depend. There's a lot of unique properties in Three Rivers. So,
Right.
yeah, it just depends. But I grew up here in the valley. I grew up going to Camp Nelson through Springville area. So I'm very familiar with the mountain areas. I'm very familiar with the property types. Yeah, it's not easy. It requires a lot of experience to appraise up there. I don't think everybody goes up there.
Okay.
Yeah, any specific questions though? Yeah, it's not easy. Finding comparable is difficult. I mean, they're old homes, small homes.
So in this case, you don't expand in mileage, you stay within the area that you're.
Unless I have to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it always depends. If there's data, I'm gonna stay there. If I have to expand, I'll expand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question as far as trying to price a home in an escalating neighborhood. If I was to add an additional 5% to the top of the most comparables, is that something that would be justified? Do you look at that as far as, asking over or what the homes are actually selling for over and?
The way I would look at it, yeah, I mean, if it's,
Would the 5% be justifiable to something that had the
and then
same
again,
square footage and?
it just depends.
considering the escalation?
It just depends. I
Okay.
mean, because right now, the market would be flat to down. So if you've got a particular submarket that you think is increasing and escalating, the data would just have to be there supported. So if you've got that's the long short of it.
Okay.
It's always the data. If you've got the data that supports it, you can do whatever you want.
Mhm.
Isn't that what the new construction builders do? To raise their prices, because they have to stay pretty consistent, right? So then the next.
They're
phase
offering
they
a ton
do-
of incentives,
Yeah.
concessions, et cetera.
But they never touch the price whenever they do reductions. A lot of people think.
It's accounting tricks.
Yeah, the price stays the same as they're taking off their incentives as far as what they put into it, so it doesn't affect the price. A lot of people think, oh, they did a reduction, oh, they reduced it. No,
No.
the base price is still the same, that price, so that it does not affect the price. And say they put $18,000 in upgrades, but they're gonna give you a $12,000 incentive, well, they just took that 12,000 off of the incentives, not the price. And that's why it's easier supposedly to do, the appraisals on the new construction when they're getting, right?
Yeah.
But at the very beginning, when you're on
Shouldn't even need
on
it.
phase one, it's a
Phase
lot
one.
harder though, right? Because you have to.
Yeah, the first one, when you have the first, when you're doing one of the first, in a new construction, yeah, it's not easy. You have to go to different developments and pull, so for sure. Yeah, new construction, they used to sell, yeah, all of the upgrades and incentives that they've changed in the new construction market, quite a bit. Go ahead.
When you're talking about incentives and pricing, so let's say that you had to go up the price because the client needed closing cost. Does that affect you guys in turning it back and saying, hey, it appraised or no, because we're basically getting it back?
Closing costs, it depends.
They still have to appraisal, right? I mean, at the end of the day.
Yeah, so like if you've got a house selling for 400,000 with $5,000 in closing costs, it still has to appraise for 400,000. So when I'm appraising it, I'm looking at the $400,000 number. So I understand the concessions are there, but I've got to value it to the full value.
Because the only way you're gonna get the concessions if it makes value, or you don't get them. So it still has to, so, and just from what I was, just to make sure, that's what I want to run through.
Yeah.
I've always run off the fact that whatever value they're putting, doesn't matter if they're giving closing costs, it doesn't matter what they're doing. It's the fact that they have to establish that value so that the bank can give that money.
Yeah, and a lot of times appraisals will come in, if you'll see appraisals come in short, they'll be short the concessions, 400 with 5, they'll come in at 395, because that's what the real estate's worth. 5,000 is the concessions. So, yeah, so if the value's there, you're good. If you're pushing it a little bit, you may not be able to get there. So, and it just depends. This is a difficult topic because it comes down to whoever's doing the appraisal. So, it's the individual appraisal, and there's a lot of leeway. So.
And there's only a certain amount of adjustments you guys can make. I mean, you could only make a certain amount, and then after that, you guys are done, no matter.
Yeah.
And that's, I think a lot of people don't understand that part as well.
Personally, I like unadjusted. I just like unadjusted sales personally. I don't like adjusting them because that, but yeah, the less adjustments, the better. Always the less adjustments, the better. Because once you introduce adjustments, you're introducing, that's your opinion. That's at the end of the day. So. Yeah.
So maybe you'll be going on to a little bit later, but one of the questions that piggybacks off of this that I've seen a lot of issue with, and I've had it many a times, I have my own ways to figure out pricing is, but when you're comparing these properties that have, for example, say maybe one has a horse corral, another one has maybe some kind of way station, the other, they have different amenities, but they're like, hey, the acreage is similar, the house is similar, but these things that are amenities are different.
And I would, those, country properties, they all kind of offer different amenities. So one may have a horse corral, one may have something. So it's kind of just considered as an amenity of a country property. The same thing with the patio. Typically, a home in the area comes with a covered entry and a covered patio. Typically, rural dwellings in the country come with some sort of, exterior amenity. So if it's above and beyond what the market typically expects for that area, then it's, something that you can value. If it's kind of just a part of a component of the piece of the property, we call it contributory value, but it's you have a range of value and you'll weigh it towards the upper end of the range because of the amenities that the property offers.
Okay, so it'd be safe to say that if I had, say, like there was 3 amenities on one property, 3 amenities on another property, they're different, but they kind of have similar values. I can say, well, this one's like 40,000, this is probably 50, this is like 10, so that's about 100,000 in amenities. Here, they're different. This has this value.
I would watch those.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I was saying. They're just kind of, the country properties offer amenities. They kind of both offer kind of equal amenities. So I would watch those. Plus or minus equal. We can go on. Well, then here we are. I just kind of taking a step back. So macro trends influencing our current market, and this is kind of what I figured everybody would be interested in. The Fed outlook and current interest rates. The Fed's been holding their interest rates at the 4.25 to 4.5, with 2 potential cuts now projected. And you can read there what I can speak and I don't speak well. But outlook and interest rates not great. The housing market dynamics, the market's softened a little bit. National home price growth has slowed to just about 0.7% year over year, the weakest since 2023. I've seen some numbers over the weekend that may bank growth was the worst we've had since like 2023 or something. I've seen headlines, social media posts everywhere, about the softening market, especially in major metros, areas like Texas, Austin, Texas, down 22% from the peak, Oakland down 20% from the peak, San Francisco down 15% from the peak. Also just kind of speaking to inventory there. Builders are starting to slow down. New construction drives the market. So if you guys want to pay attention to the market, new construction drives the market. Builders are slowing in with the concessions and what we've been talking about, what they're having to offer there. That's speaking to the weakness, the relative weakness in the market. So as the builders are slowing production, resale inventory is climbing, buyers have more options. And wage growth hasn't really kept pace with rental. Additionally, here down in the investor activity in mid-tier markets like ours has softened compared to the peak. Higher interest rates, rising operating costs, and I think you're probably seeing this. You're seeing a lot less flips, a lot less guys trying to flip properties. Most investors are concentrated on cash flow right now. And then we can move on. So that's basically on the macro. We're seeing interest rates are holding. Values are starting to stabilize or decline. Inventory's up. We're seeing, and this is inventory's up about 20% year over year in many submarkets. Buyers have more options, leading to increased competition among sellers. Median prices, as I was stating, mostly flat or down. Like I said, I think the California was negative 0.5%, which would be a 6% decline on an annual basis. Marketing times have increased, price reductions, we're seeing those everywhere, occurring in about 35% of the active listings. Interest rates are still elevated. I mean, everybody, that's the sticking point right now, is we're all kind of waiting to see where the dust settles and where the interest rates are going to be heading moving forward. We can move on from that. And here's kind of what I'm seeing over the next 3 months. Not much change over the next 3 months. Demand remains cautious due to mortgage rates. Activity peaking in June, July, which is normal. Increasing inventory across the area. More listings with price reductions, which we're seeing. And then this is always well-priced homes in desirable areas. Example here in Northwest Visalia are still moving, and I think this is probably what you were speaking of. There are still some submarkets that are holding their value and escalating, but overall, as a whole, we've seen quite a bit of weakness. Over the next 6 months, which are looking into the fall and winter of this year, there's potential for moderate interest rate relief. Anybody that pays attention, the Fed's talking about lowering interest rates in possibly August, September, October, November, somewhere in there. Homes with deferred maintenance or aggressive pricing may linger longer. I think you're starting to see the bottom fall out. You're starting to see some lower prices on the low end. Better pricing discipline may improve contract volume, we'll see. And then over the next 12 months, hoping for market stabilization if rates decline. And I don't think this is news to anybody. I would say right now it's a very uncertain market, very cautious. I think it's a very wait and see. I think people are still kind of waiting to see what happens with the tariffs, with the war in Iran, and kind of waiting to see where the dust settles and where interest rates move. Because where they are right now, aren't very attractive to a lot of buyers. So any thoughts, any discussions on the market? If you guys wanted to discuss that in depth, or if I pretty much hit the nail, similar thoughts of what you guys were thinking?
Yes.
I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts.
Very helpful. One quick thing, just to recap on FHA appraisals, what are the items that will make you do a reinspection, like double? I know the smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, those are the basic. Is there any other items that?
Paint, defective paint's big for FHA. So if there's any chipping or peeling paint on fascia, has to do with the lead-based paint isn't even a thing. If it's chipped at all, if there's any exposed wood on fascia or trim or anything like that, patio posts, yeah, paint is big for FHA. So defective paint, I would say that's a big one on FHA. But yeah, you gotta file carbon monoxide detector laws, smoke detector laws, all of those good things. Go ahead.
If I understood you correctly, you had mentioned some inspections are just exterior, some are interior. Can you?
Yeah, they have, there's a
clear-
product, it's an exterior only appraisal where it's called a drive-by appraisal. Where I will just drive by the property and inspect it from an exterior level. And then provide a valuation. The valuation will be based on the public property records. So whatever's contained in the public property records will be appraised. Typically that's for like banks. I don't, you don't use those very often. It's
Like for HELOCs, right?
yeah, typically I do a lot for smaller lenders, like I do a lot of work for Bank of Sierra, Central Valley Community Bank. So smaller lenders that have portfolios for HELOCs that need annual reviews. So they're typically used for most all purchases, most appraisals that you're gonna be dealing with are interior and exterior appraisals. But there will be a form change.
DU determines that, so desktop underwriter
go.
will determine that, the strength of your borrower as an overall and how much they're putting down. There's a lot of automated values that run through DU these days, so they'll either agree or disagree with your purchase price. And a lot of that will determine the, what DU tells you need. So the lender goes by what desktop underwriter tells us we have to have.
And those AVMs are what I was talking about earlier. They have automated valuation models that they have access to. Yeah, and they know the value of most of the properties, but and most of those are good. I mean, they're good, but it's never the same as a real appraiser.
People.
I'm
Your
gonna be-
brains.
I'm gonna be gone. They've been trying, my dad's been saying it for 40 years. They've been trying to get rid of us, but they will one day.
We know the feeling.
But yeah, underwriting, they have a lot more to do with form types, rental forms. I just receive the order and I just provide the product.
What do the private appraisals run?
500, I usually start at 500. But that all depends. It depends on what you're looking for. I can provide, exterior only appraisals are usually like $300
A
bucks.
divorce situation where they absolutely have to get an appraisal
I
sometimes
usually with CPAs and attorneys, my fees usually start at $500 a property.
But like
Sometimes
if,
it
like he talked
provides-
about, if he's having to drive up to Ponderosa or Camp Nelson or
I
Springville
charge
or,
$1,000.
where there's.
2 days, it's an overnight. Family's coming with me.
But yeah, I don't know what are they charging for appraisals now? At 750 to 1,000, right? I mean, you probably.
Lenders, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the market rate for an appraisal is $700-800. That's not what we get. I don't get that because everybody complains all the time. I'm not allowed to discuss what I get. That's another thing with the confidentiality. I can't tell you what I'm getting paid. But
An average.
Cindy.
We'll advocate for you, Corey.
so yeah, 500 sounds like a lot, but the market rate's about 7 to 8. So
By the way, we don't keep any of that. We order through AVM, so there's contracts with AV. Lender does not keep any.
no.
Yeah, no.
No, there's AMCs. There's a third party and that I'm not a fan of those. Those
That keeps money.
they take like $100 to $200 an appraisal and they don't do anything. All they do is they review the appraisal and send it to the lender. And they make $200 a pop. That industry came out of, I want to get into it too, I don't know how, but that industry came out of the Dodd-Frank in the
Dodd-Frank,
2007 financial crisis. AMCs were instituted for unbiased, the whole impartiality that we need to keep all the time.
It's supposed to be a blind choice, so
Yep.
there's supposed to be a panel, and I'm not supposed to know which appraiser gets the order. So there's Dodd-Frank, there's supposed to be a blindness that goes between the lender and the appraiser.
Because when my dad had been in business in '79, and before this, yeah, he just had clients. Bank of Sierra was one of his biggest clients. But we just work for banks. So things have changed immensely, over the past 10, 15 years in our client base and who we work with and who we work for. We can move on.
Not to mention your private appraisals versus your bank appraisals are gonna be two different appraisals.
Yeah, they're on different forms. They should be. They should be unless the appraiser doesn't know what they're doing.
Can you do just a little bit of that, because a lot of what I follow, because some of the mentees and some of other agents I work with, I've heard them, I'll hear them talk and I'll hear them say, oh, we're gonna do this appraisal, this is how we're gonna establish the value. And I said, you know what? I said, I'm not an appraiser, yet if you're doing a private appraisal versus a bank appraisal, you should ask the appraiser what's the difference, because they're not the same appraisals, and your value more than likely is not gonna be the same.
No, you don't have to follow the same rules. So yeah, they're definitely different. The lending requirements for a lender versus a non-lender, different. So yeah, different appraisals.
What would you recommend to us realtors who have clients where we're going to put their home on the market and they buy a home that's, let's say, a semi-custom home where there's like 6 of the homes in a neighborhood of like tract homes? What would be my first step in trying to find similar? Would it be going out further in radius, further in sales before I go to a different county?
Yeah, you're gonna go back in time. So you wanna go back in time and stay in your neighborhood. So you first go back in time within your neighborhood, and then you search. If you can't find anything, I'd say about 18 months maximum. But if you can't find anything, and I don't think you're going to, you said it's,
Yeah, cause it's like,
are there any neighborhoods close that are of similar quality to yours? Do you have is there a home that you think is comparable, or a neighborhood of homes that you think are comparable to the quality?
okay, so that would be my next step, cause there is no it's like if I went off of the comparables in the neighborhood, they lost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay,
worth
yeah.
of value, so it's like, how do
Cause you would
I
also, and then what I would do is I would probably use one of those and I would adjust it for the quality difference, but I would also search for a home of similar quality. So I would look around for neighborhoods that have homes of the similar quality, a home that you feel is comparable, and then price it based off of that. And then you're gonna, and you're just gonna have to justify whatever, you're just gonna have to justify that to the appraiser, when that time comes.
So then what do you recommend, just to throw you in more of a loop for you as far as the toughness, cause I know it's tough, but like acreage, mixed usage, AE land. So you get a property and they say, hey, I want you to come sell my house. And it's, a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, blah, blah, blah. You're like, oh, great. And you do the research and you're like, okay, well, it's on 7 acres. And then all of a sudden, you maybe you didn't ask the question or whatever, they find, oh man, it's citrus, they have citrus. So maybe there's 2 acres of fruit. And so, and they're harvesting.
Hobby farm.
So you would have to find the same comparable with somebody that's also harvesting, or to what extent can you go when it comes to finding similarities?
That's a hobby farm. So anything.
Hobby
A hobby farm, so it's not considered an economic farming unit, so you can't make
source of
any
income.
income, it's not a source of income, so
Supplement.
when I worked at the county, you typically needed at least 20 acres to be considered an agricultural use. So that's kind of the
Acres.
barometer that I use. So we go up to about 15 to 20 acres. Anything over 20 acres, you're gonna need a general, it's considered commercial or agricultural. Again, that could be up in Springville, if you've got like 40 acres of rolling, grazing land that's not usable, it's not buildable, that's something I can do. But if it's flat, farmland, anything over 20, I'm not touching. And the situation that you're talking about, I can't give any value to the trees. The market may recognize a little bit of value, and the way that the bank looks at it is if they were to foreclose on that property, they could just rip those trees out. Like if somebody stopped paying the mortgage, they could let the trees die. So, the trees have no value to the lender.
Okay, so and that's so that's my thing, cause it's a while back, I would say it was 10 acres.
I don't know if I explained that.
And it was only one acre was residential as far as that, and all 9 they were producing, and they were getting the crop harvested, and they had the whole thing.
And if they're
But
producing and developing an income, then it's a farm and it's a business interest.
even though it's under that, because that
And I
would be
would
like more of a
I could
special
tell you
circumstance.
that would not
That's
go
probably-
conventional.
It
That
would not
wouldn't
go
go conventional. If the value has to be in the house.
And then these are, and then again, these are questions.
Yeah, that's why, cause
I
there's
just
so
get
many,
the
those are the
assignment.
fine lines that I'm kind of like, turn that question back, okay, so it won't go conventional
Because of the income producing, the
But it-
value has to be in the house.
But in that instance, I tell the seller, don't say anything about, what's the higher value, residence? I mean, if it's a higher value, it's a residence.
Highest and
Yeah.
best use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all of this is playing games. The best way to look at it is kind of look at the laws and look at the rules and, see what you can do. But yeah, that instance, if it's producing an income, if they're deriving an income off of it, it's a business interest and it needs to be valued as a business interest. So, but yeah, from our perspective, typically anything under 20 acres is considered a hobby farm.
Okay, now another thing, mobile homes, like this, I know sometimes you guys will, on mobile homes, the land, have 1, 2, 3 mobile homes. If they have one mobile home and they do not consider it livable, they're saying, you know, we use it as a storage, we use it. What would be your guideline for you to say, no, I cannot put it as just, you know, abandoned, I have to because it has running water, or it has a meter? Or what were the guidelines to where we can say, we're not gonna count value and we don't have to worry about it?
Mobile homes have to do with their licensing status. So how is it treated by the HCD? So do they have tag numbers? And if it's not, if it doesn't have tag numbers,
Foundation.
and a permanent foundation as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have one?
And then they gotta have the HCD numbers, the HCD decals. If they don't have any of that, and they gotta be built after 1978. So if it's pre-1978, not on a permanent foundation, doesn't have decal numbers, is considered personal property. So it has to meet a lot of criteria to be considered a manufactured home and be given value.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
I figured.
You know somebody's gonna have more questions.
I don't even know if I have any more after this, but that's kind of a little bit, there we go. Open floor.
So you're saying it's because I have a property that I'm trying to get comps for, it's in Ridley.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and it's 18 acres, so less than the
Mhm.
20 that you're talking about, and